This week's article of the week: segregation, past or present? Textual analysis passage. I want you to think about our vocabulary words that we've talked about: segregation, intolerance, injustice, prejudice, bias. All those words will come in handy as you read over the article of the week. So let's look at our title: segregation, meaning separate, past or present? Question mark. That's an interesting thing to note, that question mark. This article of the week is not due until next Tuesday. So again, I want you to listen to it, make sure you reread it, and follow the annotations that I've listed here that you need to make. Of course, numbering our paragraphs, picking out any subheadings included, right? And then when you go back and answer questions, always go back to the text and find your evidence. Most important. Here we go. Think about your school. Do most students belong to one racial group? Do certain groups of kids hang out together? Do some kids go in one direction while others walk the opposite way? Do most kids stick to their own groups, not inviting other students to join? If you answered yes to any of these questions, your school or community may have qualities of segregation. Segregation means the separation of people or groups of people depending on their race or social class. Segregation doesn't allow equal opportunities for all people. When schools or communities are segregated, people within those communities suffer on many levels. A little more than 5 decades ago, most schools and public spaces were segregated in the United States. There were separate schools, separate parks, separate stores, separate everything for blacks and whites. The two races were expected and encouraged to stick with their own kind. However, in 1954, something happened that should have changed the course of American history. A group of parents in Topeka, Kansas, challenged their city's Board of Education in court. The parents urged that segregated schools were unequal and unfair. The landmark Supreme Court case known as Brown versus Board of Ed ruled separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The ruling meant schools had to become integrated. Black students and white students were allowed to attend the same schools. They were supposed to have equal educational opportunities. The U.S. was supposed to be on its way towards an equal future for all. I want you to note back in that paragraph it said 1954. And remember, I said that my schools in Central Florida and that desk that's sitting in the back of my room, we weren't integrated until 1972. So it took a long time for integration to occur in the United States. It certainly shouldn't have. We've got a subheading here. It says modern segregation. You could turn that into a question and say, what is modern segregation? Let's find out. Today, however, segregation is still alive and well. In cities across the U.S., a person's race often plays a big part in which community he will live or which school he will attend. What's the difference between present segregation and past segregation? Today, it's not just a black and white issue. In the early 1990s, courts stopped enforcing integration, especially in the South. This caused a new wave of segregation to sweep through the U.S. A recent study by the Civil Rights Project showed that in 1991, 39% of black students in southern states attended schools with a white majority. In 2003, only 29% of black students attended the majority white schools. But the most alarming studies have shown that Latino and Asian American students are quickly falling victim to segregation. The states of New York and California have been found to be the most segregated states for Latino students. In California, 47% of Latino students attend schools that have 90 to 100% non-white students. In New York, the number of Latino students attending racially segregated schools swells to 58%. Why has the idea of integration been lost for these students? Experts say it's because of housing and neighborhood communities. In neighborhoods where housing prices are high, it's rare to see Black, Latino, or immigrant Asian families purchasing homes. Hmm. Think to yourself, why is it that way? Why should it be that way? In those exclusive neighborhoods, schools tend to have more money. That means students who attend these schools often get a better education. Families that can't afford to live in high priced communities and attend these well funded schools suffer. Often, neighborhoods with low housing prices and low taxes also have less school funding. That means schools in these neighborhoods don't have the same amount of money to spend on education as schools in higher priced communities. Schools with a majority of non white students usually get fewer resources, a decreased number of courses, and lower paid teachers. Luckily, families in some communities aren't accepting this huge problem. In the 1990s, Milo Sheff and 16 other Black, Latino, and white students from Hartford, Connecticut, challenged Connecticut's Governor and Board of Education. The case, known as Sheff versus O'Neill, showed the huge differences between Hartford's racially mixed city schools and the mostly white suburban schools. City schools were poor and did not provide the same learning opportunities, facilities, or teachers as the rich suburban schools. The families in the case demanded that the state provide equal educational opportunities for all students, regardless of race or income. In 1996, the state Supreme Court found that this segregation went against the state's constitution. The ruling opened the doors for city students to attend suburban schools and gain a better education. Even now, however, many Hartford students still suffer. City schools still are not equally funded. Students who choose to attend suburban schools often have to travel 30 minutes or more by bus in order to get a better education. This is neither fair nor equal. Families, neighborhoods, and school systems should work harder to ensure that all students are given an equal education. That means fighting for equal funding and integration of students in all schools. It means continuing the ideas that began changing our nation after Brown versus Board of Ed. What does school integration mean for today's kids? By now, segregation should have been a thing of the past. But as you can see, it's definitely still very much a part of the present. Students in segregated schools don't get an equal education. It's difficult for these students to go on to college and work in high-paying careers. With poor schooling and lower-paid jobs, the cycle of poverty will continue into the future, and so will segregation. Where will it end? What will we do? We study history, as I've said before, so that we don't continue to make the same mistakes. So these are questions we need to think about and ponder. Let's move on to our questions for segregation, past or present. Make sure that when you're answering the questions, you're looking back and finding evidence to help you answer those questions. There is one question that requires a written response. Make sure you write in complete and thoughtful sentences.